All right. So, Chapter 10, Descent into Darkness. I'm just going to show you on that. It says Descent Darkness right there, but there's the into right here. And it's not my fault, is all I'm trying to say. Commander Norton was sorely tempted, but as captain, his first duty was to his ship. He might have run for it, so that left his second officer, Lieutenant Commander Mercer, as the obvious choice. Norton willingly admitted that Carl was better suited for the mission. The authority on life support systems, Mercer had written some of the standard textbooks on the subject. He had personally checked out innumerable types of equipment, often under hazardous conditions, and his biofeedback control was famous. At a moment's notice, he could cut his pulse rate by 50% and reduce respiration to almost zero for up to 10 minutes. This useful trick had saved his life on more than one occasion. So as I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking that I want to get the next video started rendering, because it's a good idea, and maybe to get some more water. So I'll be back in just one moment. Alright, I changed it. The authority on life support systems, Mercer had written some of the standard textbooks on the subject. He had personally checked innumerable types of equipment, often under hazardous conditions, and his biofeedback control was famous. At a moment's notice, he could cut his pulse rate by 50% and reduce respiration to almost zero for up to 10 minutes. This useful little trick had saved his life more than on one occasion. Yet despite his great ability and intelligence, was almost wholly lacking in imagination. To him, the most dangerous experiment, or missions, were simply jobs that had to be done. He had never took unnecessary risks that he had no use for at all. He never took unnecessary risks, and he had no use at all for what was commonly regarded as courage. Two mottos at his desk summed up his philosophy in life. One asked, "What have you forgotten?" The other said, "Help stamp out bravery." The fact that he was widely regarded as the bravest man in the fleet was the only thing that ever made him angry. Given Mercer was automatically selected the next man, his inseparable companion, Lieutenant Joe Calvert, was hard to see what the two had in common. The lightly built, rather high-strung navigational officer was 10 years younger than his stolid and imperturbable friend, who certainly did not share his passionate interest in the art of the primitive cinema. But no one could predict where the lightning will strike, and years ago Mercer and Calvert had established an apparently stable liaison that was common enough. More and more unusual was the fact that they also shared a wife back on Earth, who had borne each of them a child. Norton hoped that he could meet her one day. She was the most remarkable woman. The triangle had lasted for at least 5 years and still seemed to be an equilateral one. The two men were not strong enough for an exploring team. Two men were not enough for an exploring team. Long ago, it had been found that 3 was optimum, for if one man was lost, 2 might still escape, whereas a single survivor would be doomed. After a good deal of thought, Norton had chosen Technical Sergeant Willard Myron, a mechanical genius who could make anything work, or design something better if it wouldn't. Myron was the ideal man to identify alien pieces of equipment. On the long sabbatical from his regular job, an associate professor at Astrotech, the sergeant had refused to accept the commission on the grounds that he did not wish to block the promotion of more deserving career officers. No one took this explanation seriously, and it was generally agreed that Will rated 0 for ambition. He might make it to space sergeant, but he would never be a full professor. Myron, like countless NCOs before him, had discovered the ideal compromise between power and responsibility. As they drifted through the last airlock and floated out along a weightless axis of Rama, Calvert found himself, as he so often did, in the middle of movie flashback. He sometimes wondered if he should attempt to cure himself of this habit. He could not see had any disadvantages. He could not even make the dullest situation interesting, and who could tell? It could make even the dullest situation interesting, and who could tell? One day, it might save his life. He would remember what Fairbanks or Connery or Hiroshi had done in similar circumstances. This time, he was about to go over the top. In one of early 20th century wars, Mercer was a sergeant leading three-man patrol on a night raid in no man's land. It was not too difficult to imagine that they were at the bottom of an immense shell crater. The one had somehow become neatly tailored into small ascending terraces. The crater was flooded with light and the three widely spaced plasma arcs, which gave almost shadowless illumination over the whole interior. But beyond that, over the rim of more distant terraces, were darkness and mystery. In his mind's eye, Calvert knew perfectly well what lay there. First, there was a flat circular plain over 3 kilometers across, trisecting into 3 equal parts, and looking much like broad railroad tracks. There were 3 wide ladders, their rungs recessed into the surface so that they would provide no obstruction to anything sliding over them. Since the arrangement was so completely symmetrical, there were no reason to choose a ladder rather than another that nearest the airlock Alpha had been selected purely as a matter of convenience. Though the rungs of the ladder were uncomfortably far apart, that presented no problem. Even at the rim of the hub of half a kilometer from the axis, gravity was still barely 1/13 of Earth's. Although they were carrying almost 100 kilos of equipment and life support gear, they would be able to move easily hand over hand. Commander Norton and the backup team accompanied them along the guide ropes that had been stretched from the airlock to Alpha to the rim of the crater, then beyond the range of the floodlights. The darkness of Rama lay before them. All that could be seen in the dancing beams of helmet lights were the first few hundred meters of the ladder, dwindling across a flat and otherwise featureless plain. And now, Mercer told himself, I'm going to have to make my first decision. Am I going up that ladder or down it? The question was not a trivial one. They were still essentially zero gravity, but the brain could select any reference system it pleases. By simple effort of will, Mercer could convince himself that he was looking out across a horizontal plane, or up a face of a vertical well, or over the edge of a sheer cliff. Not a few astronauts had experienced grave psychological problems by choosing the wrong coordinates when they started a complicated job. Mercer was determined to go head first, and any other mode of locomotion would be awkward. Moreover, that way he could more easily see what is in front of him. For the first few 100 meters, therefore, he would imagine he was climbing upward. Only when he increased the pull of gravity and made it impossible to maintain the illusion would he switch his mental directions to 180 degrees. He grasped his first rung and gently propelled himself across the ladder. Movement was easy as swimming along the seabed, easier in fact, for there was no backwards drag of water. It was so easy that there was temptation to go too fast. But Mercer was too experienced to hurry in a situation as novel as this. In his earphones he could hear the regular breathing of his 2 companions. He needed no other proof that they were in good shape, and wasted no time in conversation. Though he was tempted to look back, he decided not to risk it until they had reached the platform at the end of the ladder. The rungs were spaced in a uniform half-meter apart for the first proportion of the climb. Mercer had missed the alternate ones. He counted them carefully, and at around 200 noticed the first distinct sensation of weight. The spin of Rama was starting to make itself felt. The rung 400, he estimated his apparent weight was about 5 kilos, or about 11 pounds. This was no problem, but it was getting hard to pretend he was climbing when he was being firmly dragged upwards. The 500th rung seemed a good place to pause. He could feel the muscles in his arms responding to the unaccustomed exercise. Even though Rama was doing all the work, he had merely to guide himself. "Everything okay, Skipper?" he remarked. "We're just passing halfway mark. Joe, Will, any problems?" "I'm fine. What are you stopping for?" Calvert answered. "Same here, but watch out for the Coriolis force. It's starting to build up." So Mercer already noticed, when he let go of the rings, that he had a distinct tendency to drift off to the right. He knew perfectly well that this was merely the effect of Rama's spin, but it seemed as if some mysterious force was gently pushing him away from the ladder. Perhaps it was time to start going feet first, now that down was beginning to have a physical meaning. He would run the risk of momentary disorientation. "Watch out, I'm going to swing around." Holding firm the rung, he used his arms to twist himself around 180 degrees. He found himself momentarily blinded by the lights of his companions far above him, but now it was above. He could see a fainter glow along the rim of the sheer cliff, silhouetted against the features of Norton, the backup team watching him intently. They seemed very small and far away, and he gave them a reassuring wave. He released his grip and let Rama's still feeble pseudo-gravity take over. The drop was 101 rung to the next required more than 2 seconds on Earth. In the same time, a man would have fallen 30 meters. The rate of fall was so painfully slow, he hurried things up by a trifle by pushing with his hands, gliding over spans of dozens of rings at a time. He checked himself with his feet whenever he felt he was traveling too fast. At rung 700, he came to another halt and swung his beam of his helmet lamp downward. As he calculated, the beginning of the stairway was only 50 meters below. A few minutes ahead, they were on the first step. It was a strange experience after months of space to stand upright on a solid surface and to feel it pressing against one's feet. Their weight was still less than 10 kilograms, but it was enough to give the feeling of stability. When he closed his eyes, Mercer could believe that he once more had a real world beneath him. The ledge of a platform from which the stairway descended was about 10 meters wide and curved upward on each side until it disappeared into darkness. Mercer knew that it formed a complete circle, and that if he walked along 500 kilometers, he would come right back to his starting point, having circumambulated Rama. The functional gravity that existed here, however, was real walking was impossible. It could only be bound along in giant strides, and therein lay danger. The stairway range of the lights would be deceptively easy to descend, but it would be essential to hold on to the tail handrail that flanked it. Too bold a step might send an incautious traveler arching far into space. He would hit the surface again, perhaps meters lower down. The impact would be harmless, and its consequence might not be, for the spinorama would have moved the stairway to the left, and so falling body would hit against the smooth curve that swept in an unbroken arch against the plain almost 700 kilometers below. Mercer told himself would be the hell of a toboggan ride, and the terminal speed, even in this gravity, could be several hundred kilometers an hour. Perhaps it would be possible to apply enough friction to check such a headlong descent. If so, it might even be the most convenient way to reach the inner surface of Rama. But that was some very cautious experimenting would be necessary first. "Skipper," reported Mercer, "there were no problems getting down the ladder. If you agree you'd like to continue toward the next platform, I want to time our rate of descent on the stairway." Norton replied without hesitation. "Go ahead." He did not need to add, "Proceed with caution." It did not take Mercer long to make a fundamental discovery. It was impossible, at least at this 1/20th of a gravity level, to walk down the stairway in the normal manner. Any attempt to do so resulted in slow motion, dreamlike movement that was intolerably tedious. The only practical way was to ignore the steps and use the handrail to pull oneself downward. Calvert had come to the same conclusion. This stairway was built to walk up, not down, he exclaimed. You can use the steps when you're moving against gravity, but they're just nuisance in this direction. It may not be dignified, but I think the best way is to slide along the handrails. That's ridiculous, protested Myron. I can't believe Rama10 did it this way. I doubt they ever used this stairway. It's obviously only for emergencies. They must have some mechanical transport system to get up here. A funicular, I don't know how to say that, perhaps? That would explain those long slots running down the hub. I always assumed they were drains, but I suppose they could be both. I wonder if it ever rained here. Perhaps, said Mercer. I think Joe is right, and to hell with dignity. Here we go. The handrail presumably was designed for something like hands. It was a smooth, flat metal bar supported by widely spaced pillars, and a meter high. Mercer straddled it, carefully gauged the braking power he could exert with his hands, and let himself slide. Sedately, slowly picking up speed, he descended into the darkness. Moving in the pool of light from his headlamp. He had gone about 50 meters when he called to the others to join him. None of them would admit it, but they all felt like boys again, sliding down the banisters. In less than 2 minutes, they made a kilometer descent in safely in comfort. Whenever they felt they were going too fast, a tightened grip on the handrail provided all the braking that was necessary. I hope you enjoyed yourselves, Norton called when they stopped off the second platform. Climbing back won't be so easy. That's what I want to check, replied Mercer, who was walking experimentally back and forth, getting his feel for the increased gravity. It's almost 1/10 of a G here. You really notice the difference. We walked, or more accurately guided, to the edge of the platform and shone his helmet light down to the next section of the stairway. As far as his beam could reach, it appeared identical with the one above, though careful examination of photos had shown that the height of the steps steadily decreased with the rise in gravity, and the stars had apparently been designed with effort required to climb with less constant at every point its long curving sweep. Mercer glanced up toward the hub of Rama, now almost to 2 kilometers above him. The little glow of light and this tiny figure silhouetted against it seemed horribly far away. For the first time, he was glad he could not see the whole length of the enormous stairway. Despite his steady nerves, the lack of imagination, he was not sure how he would react if he could see himself like an insect crawling up the face of a vertical saucer, more than 16 kilometers high, with the upper half hanging above him. Until this moment, he had regarded the darkness as a nuisance, now almost welcomed it. There was no change of temperature, he reported to Norton. Still just below freezing. The air pressure is up, as we expected, about 300 millibars. Even with this low oxygen content, it's almost breathable. Farther down, there will be no problems at all. That will simplify exploration enormously. What a find! The first world on which we can walk without breathing gear. In fact, I'm going to take a sniff. Up on the hub, Norton stirred a little uneasily, but Mercer, of all men, knew exactly what he was doing. He would already have made enough tests to satisfy him. Himself. Mercer equalized pressure, unlatched the securing clip of his helmet, and opened it a crack. He took a cautious breath, then a deeper one. The air of Rama was dead and musty, as if a tomb so ancient that the last trace of physical corruption had disappeared long ago. Even Mercer's ultra-sensitive nose, trained through years of testing life support systems and beyond the point of disaster, could detect no recognizable odors. There was a faint metallic tang, and he suddenly recalled the first men on the moon had reported a hint of burnt gunpowder when they repressurized the lunar module. Mercer imagined that the moon dust-contaminated cabin of Eagle must have smelled rather like Rama. He sealed the helmet again and emptied his lungs of the alien air. He extracted no sustenance from it. Even a mountaineer acclimated to the summit of Everest would die quickly here, but a few kilometers further down would be a different matter. What else was there to do here? He could think of nothing except the enjoyment of a gentle, unaccustomed gravity. There was no point in growing used to that, since they would be returning immediately to the weightlessness of the hub. "We're coming back, Skipper," he reported. "There's no reason to go further until we're ready to go all the way." "I agree. We'll be timing you, but take it easy." As he bounded up the steps, 3 or 4 at a stride, Mercer agreed that Calvert had been perfectly correct. These stairs were built to be walked up, not down. As long as one did not look back and ignored the steepness of the of the ascending curve, the climb was a delightful experience. After about 200 steps, however, he began to feel some twinges in his calf muscles as he decided to slow down. Others had done the same when he ventured quick glance over his shoulder. They were considerably farther down the slope. The climb was wholly uneventful, merely an apparently endless succession of steps, when they stood once more on the highest platform immediately beneath the ladder. They were barely winded, and it had taken them only 10 minutes. They paused for another 10, then started on the last vertical kilometer. Jump, catch hold of the rung, jump, catch, jump, catch. It was easy, but so boringly repetitious that there was danger of becoming careless. Halfway up the ladder, they rested for 5 minutes. By this time, their arms as well as their legs had begun to ache. Once again, Mercer was glad that they could see so little of the vertical face on which they were climbing. It was not too difficult to pretend the ladder extended only a few meters beyond their circle of light, and would soon come to an end. Jump, catch, a rung, jump, jump, catch, a rung, jump. Then, quite suddenly, the ladder really ended. They were back in the weightless world of the Axis, amongst their anxious friends. The whole trip had taken under an hour, and they felt a sense of modest achievement. But it was too much too soon to feel pleased with themselves. For all their efforts, they had traversed less than an eighth of the cyclopean stairway. That was chapter 10. That was chapter 10.